In the land where dreams were once whispered across wild frontiers, where 13 fragile colonies defied the mightiest empire of their time, and where generations carved hope from struggle, there lies a story unlike any other. A story of freedom and fracture, of invention and ambition, of triumphs that shook the world and tragedies that scarred the soul of a nation. From the revolutionary fires of 1776, to the thunder of Gettysburg, to the clash of ideologies in the Cold War, and the towers that fell on 9/11s, this is the journey of America. A nation born in revolution, tested in civil war, forged in world conflict, and propelled into global power. But beyond the politics and battles lies something deeper. A people who have always wrestled with the promise of liberty and the weight of responsibility. Tonight, we trace the epic tale of the United States of America, the rise of a modern superpower that changed not only its own destiny, but the destiny of the world. History, the birth of a nation. Long before skyscrapers rose and superhighways cut across the continent, the land that would become the United States was a wilderness, alive with voices older than time itself. Native American tribes Cherokee, Navajo Sioux, Iroquois, and hundreds more thrived across forests, plains, deserts, and coastlines. They lived in harmony with the land, shaping a complex tapestry of traditions, governance, and spirituality. But in the 16th and 17th centuries, waves of European settlers began arriving, driven by hunger for land, religious freedom, and wealth. The English established Jamestown in 1607, planting the first seeds of permanent settlement, while the Pilgrims of Plymouth carried with them dreams of liberty and community. Yet, from the very beginning, America was a paradoxal land of opportunity, shadowed by dispossession. As native peoples were forced off ancestral lands, and enslaved Africans were brought across the Atlantic in chains, their lives fueling the colony's growth as the 18th century unfolded. 13 British colonies stretched along the Atlantic coast, tied to London by law and trade, but developing their own identity. Life in Boston, Philadelphia, and Charleston pulsed with new ideas about governance, faith, and economy. Farmers and merchants grew restless under British taxes and restrictions, especially after the Stamp Act and the infamous Boston Tea Party. Voices of dissent rose: Samuel Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, men who dared to imagine a society where power was not dictated by kings, but by the people themselves. What began as protest soon swelled into open defiance, till the spark of revolution was lit. In 1776, under the flickering candlelight of Independence Hall, words were etched into history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. The Declaration of Independence, signed on July 4th, was more than rebellion. It was a vision for a new world order. The Revolutionary War that followed tested the will of the colonies against the unmatched might of the British Empire. Washington led his ragtag Continental Army through freezing winters and desperate battles from Valley Forge to Yorktown. Against all odds, the colonies emerged victorious, and the Treaty of Paris in 1783 recognized the birth of a new nation, the United States of America. But freedom came with challenges. The young nation wrestled with its identity, crafting a constitution. In 1787, that balanced liberty with order. The Bill of Rights promised freedoms of speech, press, and religion, ideals that would inspire the world. Yet beneath this triumph, contradictions festered. Slavery remained legal, native tribes were displaced, and women were denied equal voice. The nation stood on the edge of greatness, but also on the fault lines of deep divisions. The question was clear: could this fragile republic truly hold together? The early decades of the republic became a test of endurance. Leaders like George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson set precedents for governance. Expansion westward carried settlers across the Appalachian Mountains into territories that promised new opportunities, but at a devastating cost to indigenous peoples. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the nation's size, and Lewis and Clark charted the unknown wilderness, igniting America's restless spirit of exploration. Yet, as the stars of the young flag multiplied, so too did tensions between North and South, liberty and slavery, unity and disunion. The seeds of future conflict were quietly being sown in the soil of freedom, civil war, and Reconstruction. By the mid-19th century, the United States stood at a crossroads. Expansion westward had turned the nation into a continental giant, but beneath this triumph simmered a question that could no longer be ignored: slavery. In the cotton fields of the South, enslaved Africans and their descendants labored under brutal conditions, generating wealth that powered the Southern economy. Meanwhile, in the industrializing North, factories, railroads, and immigrant labor forged a different vision of progress. The clash of these two worlds, one rooted in bondage, the other aspiring toward free labor, grew sharper with every passing decade. Political compromises, like the Missouri Compromise and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, sought to hold the nation together, but they were bandages over a deepening wound. By the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, the fracture could no longer be contained. 11 Southern states seceded, forming the Confederate States of America. The dream of unity had shattered, and the nation plunged into civil war. The Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, became the bloodiest conflict in American history. Brothers took up arms against brothers, towns were divided, and the fate of the Republic hung in the balance. The early years were grim for the Union, with Confederate generals like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson delivering crushing defeats. Yet Lincoln's resolve never wavered. His words, simple but powerful, framed the conflict as more than a battle for territory. It was a battle for the very soul of America. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation declared freedom for enslaved people in Confederate states, transforming the war into a moral crusade. At Gettysburg, where fields ran red with the blood of tens of thousands, Lincoln later stood to remind the nation that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Victory did not come swiftly. Union armies endured staggering losses before grinding down Confederate forces through sheer manpower, industrial might, and unyielding determination. In April 1865, as Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, the cannons finally fell silent. The Union was preserved, and slavery, an institution that had scarred America for over 2 centuries, was abolished with the 13th Amendment. Yet triumph was tempered by tragedy. Just days after victory, President Lincoln was assassinated, his dream of reconciliation left unfinished. The war had ended, but healing the wounds it left behind would prove even more difficult. Reconstruction dawned as a turbulent chapter. The South lay in ruins, its cities burned, its economy shattered, its people divided between bitterness and hope. Freedmen, once enslaved, now faced the daunting task of building lives in freedom while confronting relentless opposition. The 14th and 15th Amendments promised citizenship and voting rights, but progress was met with violent resistance. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan spread terror, while black codes sought to strip away newfound liberties. Meanwhile, Northern politicians debated how far federal power should reach into Southern society. Reconstruction governments, often backed by federal troops, attempted bold reforms, building schools, expanding infrastructure, and integrating African Americans into civic life. But, as years passed, fatigue set in, and the North turned its attention elsewhere. By 1877, Reconstruction collapsed under political compromise, leaving many promises unfulfilled. Federal troops withdrew, and the South descended into a new order of racial segregation and disenfranchisement, Jim Crow laws that would endure for nearly a century. Yet, despite the setbacks, the Civil War and Reconstruction had irrevocably altered the nation. The United States had survived its greatest internal test, emerging scarred but intact. The Union endured, slavery was abolished, and the principle that all men were equal under the law was etched into the nation's foundation, though its full realization remained distant. From the ashes of war, America began a new journey, one that would carry it toward industrial might, global conflict, and eventually, superpower status. Industrialization, world wars, and the rise of global power. In the aftermath of the Civil War, America was transformed into a nation of steel, steam, and ambition. The late 19th century, often called the Gilded Age, witnessed astonishing industrial growth. Railroads stitched the continent together, linking the Atlantic to the Pacific and fueling commerce on an unprecedented scale. Immigrants poured through Ellis Island, carrying dreams of opportunity and swelling the workforce of booming cities like New York, Chicago, and Pittsburgh. Andrew Carnegie built empires of steel. John D. Rockefeller dominated oil. And Henry Ford pioneered the automobile assembly line, ushering in a new era of mass production. Skyscrapers rose into the heavens while electric lights illuminated streets. Once cloaked in darkness, yet beneath the glitter of progress, inequality festered. Tenement housing overflowed with poverty. Laborers toiled in brutal conditions, and political corruption tainted democracy. The wealth of a few stood in stark contrast to the struggles of the many. America was rising, but at a cost that would ignite waves of social change. As the 20th century dawned, the United States began to flex its muscles on the global stage. The Spanish-American War of 1898 marked the nation's first step into imperial power, as it gained territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. The Panama Canal soon became a symbol of engineering brilliance and America's expanding reach. But it was World War I that propelled the U.S. into the center of world affairs. Initially reluctant, the nation entered the conflict in 1917, tipping the balance in favor of the Allies. American troops, doughboys as they were called, crossed the Atlantic, carrying not only rifles but the ideals of democracy and self-determination. When the war ended, President Woodrow Wilson's vision of a League of Nations promised a new world order, though the U.S. itself would retreat into isolation. The Roaring '20s followed a decade of jazz, cinema, and prosperity, but it all came crashing down with the Great Depression in 1929, plunging millions into poverty and despair. From this darkness emerged Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, a bold experiment that redefined the role of government. Programs put Americans back to work, built dams and highways, and offered a fragile lifeline to a nation in crisis. But even as America healed, storm clouds gathered overseas. Fascism rose in Europe, and Japan expanded across Asia, setting the stage for another global inferno. When Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7, 1941, America could no longer stand apart. The nation mobilized with astonishing speed, transforming its factories into war machines, its men into soldiers, and its women into the vital workforce that kept the engines of victory alive. From the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, American power became decisive in crushing Axis forces. By 1945, when the atomic bomb fell upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the United States stood at the pinnacle of global dominance, victorious. Yet faced with the moral weight of unleashing a weapon that changed humanity forever, with the end of World War II, America emerged as one of two superpowers in a divided world. The Soviet Union stood on one side, the United States on the other, and between them stretched a Cold War that would define the second half of the 20th century. The Marshall Plan rebuilt a devastated Europe, while NATO solidified alliances against communist expansion. At home, the post-war years brought unprecedented prosperity. Suburban homes sprouted across the landscape. Highways spread like arteries of progress, and consumer culture boomed. Television flickered in living rooms. Rock and roll electrified youth, and the American dream seemed within reach for many. Yet the shadow of nuclear annihilation loomed constantly. And civil rights struggles at home reminded the world that America's promises were still unfinished. From the Korean War to the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cold War was a chess game played on the edge of catastrophe. By the 1960s and 70s, America was a nation both triumphant and tormented. The civil rights movement, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., sought to break the chains of segregation, fulfilling the promises left incomplete after the Civil War. At the same time, the Vietnam War tore the nation apart, as images of body bags and burning villages broadcast into American homes eroded trust in government. The moon landing in 1969 symbolized humanity's greatest leap, with Neil Armstrong's words echoing across the cosmos, proof of American ingenuity and ambition. Yet Watergate shattered faith in leadership, and economic crises in the 1970s revealed vulnerabilities beneath the surface of power. Still, as the Cold War stretched on, America endured. And when the Berlin Wall finally fell in 1989, and the Soviet Union collapsed soon after, the United States stood as the lone superpower, the undisputed leader of a new global era. Culture, language, arts, literature, and music. If history is the spine of America, then culture is its heartbeat, the rhythm that gives life to its identity. At the center of this cultural mosaic is language. English dominates, not merely as the tongue of governance and commerce, but as the medium through which stories, dreams, and struggles are told. Yet within America's borders, hundreds of voices echo, Spanish spoken in vibrant barrios, Mandarin and Cantonese flowing through Chinatowns, Arabic and Urdu alive in immigrant enclaves, and Native American languages striving to survive despite centuries of suppression. This linguistic diversity reflects the nation's paradox: a place unified by a common tongue, yet enriched by countless others. Language in America has always been a tool of power and identity, a means of assimilation and resistance, of poetry and protest. To understand the American story is to listen carefully to the many languages that weave its cultural fabric. Art in America has always been both a mirror and a hammer, reflecting reality while shaping it. From the haunting landscapes of the Hudson River School to the bold modernism of Georgia O'Keeffe, American painters captured the vastness and vitality of the land. The Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s gave rise to a wave of Black artists and writers who transformed pain into beauty and identity into pride. Jacob Lawrence's vivid panels told stories of migration and struggle, while modern graffiti artists turned city walls into canvases of defiance and community. Architecture, too, became an expression of American identity. Skyscrapers like the Empire State Building and the Willis Tower stretching skyward, symbols of ambition carved in steel and glass. In every brushstroke, sculpture, or building, American art tells us not only what the nation is, but what it dares to imagine. Literature has been America's conscience, chronicling its triumphs and its deepest wounds. Mark Twain gave voice to the humor and contradictions of frontier life, while Walt Whitman sang of democracy and the common man in verses that celebrated the nation's diversity. The 20th century saw Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and John Steinbeck reveal the struggles of modernity, wealth, and poverty. African American voices, long silenced, broke through with power. Langston Hughes, Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, each writing not just stories, but testimonies of survival, resilience, and hope. Today, immigrant writers like Jhumpa Lahiri and Viet Thanh Nguyen expand the American canon, reminding the world that America is not a fixed narrative, but a living dialogue between past and present, native and newcomer. Through literature, America confronts its contradictions, preserves its memories, and dreams of what it might yet become. And then there is music, the universal language through which America speaks most clearly to the world. From the spirituals, sung by enslaved people, to the birth of blues in the Mississippi Delta, music has been both an outlet for pain and a celebration of resilience. Jazz, born in New Orleans, became the soundtrack of innovation, improvisation, and freedom. Country music told the stories of rural hardship and heartland pride, while gospel filled churches with hope. Rock and roll shook the world in the 1950s, led by icons like Elvis Presley, before being redefined by the rebellious voices of the 1960s. Hip-hop, born from the streets of the Bronx, rose to become a global force, carrying with it the rhythms of struggle, protest, and unfiltered truth. From Carnegie Hall to neighborhood block parties, America's music is a living archive of its history, raw, diverse, and unstoppable. Together, language, art, literature, and music form the soul of American culture. They reveal a people constantly in dialogue with themselves, celebrating freedom while confronting injustice, innovating while preserving tradition, dreaming while wrestling with reality. Culture in America is not static. It evolves, adapts, and reinvents itself with every generation. It absorbs influences from across the globe while exporting its own to the farthest corners of the world. From Hollywood movies that dominate screens everywhere, to novels taught in classrooms, from Lagos to Tokyo, to songs that spark movements, American culture is both uniquely national and undeniably global. It is through these expressions of creativity that the United States tells its truest story, not through speeches or battles, but through the voices of its people, rising in harmony and sometimes in discord, but always in pursuit of something greater: festivals, cuisine, and traditions. Festivals in the United States are more than just celebrations. They are windows into the nation's collective soul. The 4th of July, Independence Day, is perhaps the most iconic. Fireworks illuminating night skies, parades marching through small towns and sprawling cities alike, and families gathering to celebrate freedom hard-won in 1776. Thanksgiving, rooted in early colonial history, tells of feasts shared between pilgrims and Native Americans. Though modern reflections acknowledge the complexities of that story, today it remains a holiday of gratitude, family, and shared meals, uniting millions around tables laden with turkey, stuffing, and pumpkin pie. But America's festivals extend far beyond its founding myths. From Mardi Gras in New Orleans, with its kaleidoscope of colors, music, and masks, to the Lunar New Year celebrated in Chinatowns across the country, the calendar is filled with reminders of the diverse cultures that call America home. These festivals are not just days off, they are proof that the United States is a mosaic of traditions, stitched together yet retaining their unique hues. Cuisine in America tells a story of migration, adaptation, and innovation. Burgers, hot dogs, and apple pie may be symbols of Americana, but beneath them lies a complex culinary heritage. Native Americans introduced corn, squash, and beans, the three sisters that sustained early settlers. African Americans, through the pain of slavery and the resilience of culture, shaped Southern cuisine with dishes like gumbo, fried chicken, and collard greens. Immigrants brought their flavors across oceans: Italian pasta and pizza, Chinese stir-fries and dim, some Mexican tacos and tamales. Each new wave added to the menu, and over time, these foods blended into uniquely American traditions: Tex-Mex, Cajun, barbecue. Even regional specialties tell stories: clam chowder in New England, jambalaya in Louisiana, deep dish pizza in Chicago. In America, food is never just food. It's heritage served on a plate. A reminder that the nation's strength lies in its ability to absorb and reinvent flavors from every corner of the globe. Traditions in the United States are as varied as its people, shaped by both shared history and local identities. In the Midwest, county fairs bring together farming communities to celebrate harvests, complete with livestock competitions and Ferris wheels glowing under summer nights. In the South, college football Saturdays are more than games, they are rituals of pride, loyalty, and community. In the Southwest, Dadalos, Muertos honors ancestors with altars, marigolds, and memories, reflecting the enduring influence of Mexican heritage. Meanwhile, across countless towns, the holiday season transforms streets into wonderlands of lights and carols, culminating in Christmas morning or Hanukkah gatherings. These traditions, whether secular or sacred, large or intimate, provide continuity in a nation often defined by change. They ground communities, offering belonging in a land where identity is always in motion. Some traditions are distinctly American, innovations that the world has come to recognize. Halloween, with its costumes, haunted houses, and trick-or-treating, has become an export as popular abroad as it is at home. The Super Bowl, more than a football game, is a cultural event where millions gather to watch not only the sport, but the halftime show and commercials that spark national conversations. Black Friday, the frenzied shopping day after Thanksgiving, speaks to America's consumer culture. While Memorial Day and Veterans Day remind citizens of the sacrifices that underpin their freedoms, each tradition carries layers of meanings. I'm celebratory, some reflective, some critical of the society that created them. Together, they form a cultural calendar as diverse and dynamic as the nation itself. What makes American festivals, cuisine, and tradition so powerful is not merely their variety, but their adaptability. They evolve with each generation, absorbing influences, shedding outdated customs, and creating new rituals. A child in Los Angeles might celebrate both Thanksgiving and Diwali. A family in New York might enjoy dumplings at Lunar New Year and barbecues on the 4th of July. This blending is what makes American culture both distinctive and universal. In these celebrations and meals, we see not only the past, but also the promise of the future, a reminder that identity in America is never fixed, but always being reimagined. Culture here is not a museum. It is a living, breathing tradition, alive in every festival, every recipe, every tradition carried forward and reinvented for tomorrow. Film, media, fashion, and popular culture. If there is one cultural export that has defined America's image in the eyes of the world, it is film. Hollywood, rising in the early 20th century from the hills of Los Angeles, became not just an industry, but a dream factory. Silent films of Charlie Chaplin brought laughter during hard times, while epic westerns mythologized the frontier spirit. By the mid-century, Hollywood had become the global capital of cinema, producing not only entertainment, but narratives that shaped perceptions of freedom, heroism, and possibility. Movies like Gone with the Wind, The Godfather, Star Wars, and Titanic transcended borders, embedding themselves into global culture. Behind the glamour of red carpets and Oscar nights, however, lay deeper truths. Cinema as a reflection of social change, a battleground of representation, and an art form that could challenge injustice. From civil rights struggles to the war on terror, American film has often served as both escape and confrontation. Lens through which the world watches America wrestle with itself. Alongside film, American media became one of the most powerful forces of the modern era. In the early 20th century, newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post shaped national conversations, while radio connected families during the Great Depression and wartime. Television later transformed living rooms into portals of shared experience. From Walter Cronkite's steady voice announcing the moon landing to the haunting live images of September 11th today. Media in America is both fractured and far-reaching. Cable news, social media, podcasts, and streaming platforms have splintered audiences, giving rise to echo chambers and fierce debates about truth itself. Yet, for better or worse, American media continues to influence global narratives. It doesn't merely report events, it defines them, amplifying America's triumphs, exposing its flaws, and exporting its cultural debates across oceans. Fashion in America has always carried the spirit of reinvention. From the tailored suits of Wall Street to the denim jeans born in California gold mines, clothing has told the story of both industry and identity. In the 20th century, America reshaped fashion into a reflection of its democratic ethos: accessible, practical, yet innovative. Icons like Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, and Tommy Hilfiger created styles that merged sophistication with casual wear. Street fashion later emerged from hip-hop culture, redefining what was considered stylish and blurring the lines between luxury and urban authenticity. Today, sneakers can be as symbolic as designer gowns, and brands like Nike or Supreme carry cultural meaning as much as aesthetic appeal. Fashion in America is not about uniformity, it is about expression. It is a space where rebellion, aspiration, and individuality collide, making every sidewalk a runway of self-definition. Perhaps no realm better captures America's cultural dynamism than popular culture, an ever-shifting landscape of trends, icons, and shared moments. Pop music idols like Michael Jackson, Madonna, Beyoncé, and Taylor Swift have become global voices, shaping not just sound, but style and attitude. Television sitcoms such as Friends and The Simpsons painted humorous, sometimes biting portraits of American life, while shows like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, though international, proved America's dominance in long-form storytelling. Sports, too, fuel the pulse of pop culture. The NBA, NFL, and MLB are not merely athletic competitions, but cultural events, spawning superstars whose influence transcends the game. Social media has accelerated this phenomenon, turning viral dances, memes, and influencers into instant cultural touchstones. In America, popular culture is not created in ivory towers, it bubbles up from neighborhoods, studios, stadiums, and phone screens, constantly rewriting itself. Film, media, fashion, and popular culture together form the modern mythology of America. They are the images, sounds, and symbols through which the nation tells its story to itself and to the world. They amplify contradictions, glamorizing consumerism while critiquing it, celebrating individuality while mass-producing trends. Yet their reach is undeniable. From the glimmer of Hollywood lights to the roar of a Super Bowl halftime show, from TikTok dances spreading globally to Levi's jeans worn on every continent, America's cultural influence stretches farther than any army or government. It is soft power at its strongest, persuasion through imagination, dominance through inspiration. In these realms of creativity and commerce, America has built not just entertainment, but an empire of influence, one that continues to shape global identity in the 21st century. Economy, resources, agriculture, and early trade. The economic story of the United States begins not with Wall Street skyscrapers or Silicon Valley startups, but with the land itself. Vast fertile plains stretched across the Midwest. Rivers wound like arteries through forests and mountains, and coastlines opened. The nation, two oceans teeming with opportunity. In the early colonial days, agriculture was the bedrock of survival and prosperity. Tobacco fields in Virginia, rice paddies in the Carolinas, and wheat farms in the northern colonies became the engines of local economies. Natural resources, timber, furs, fish, and fertile soil were traded across the Atlantic, fueling the triangular trade that tied America to Europe and Africa. Yet, embedded within this prosperity was a harsh truth. The economy was built on the backs of enslaved Africans whose labor transformed the colonies into profitable enterprises. From the beginning, America's wealth was entwined with both boundless potential and deep moral contradictions. As independence dawned, America's agricultural foundation only deepened. Cotton became king in the South, driving an economy that fed the textile mills of Britain and New England alike. The invention of the cotton gin in 1793 expanded production at staggering rates, entrenching slavery further into the Southern economy. Meanwhile, in the North, small family farms sustained communities, while merchants in cities like Boston, New York, and Philadelphia grew rich from trade. America's rivers became lifelines of commerce, carrying goods to markets, while ports connected the young nation to the wider world. The Erie Canal, completed in 1825, linked the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean, opening vast new regions to trade. The early U.S. economy was a tale of contrasts, agrarian and commercial, slave-driven and free labor, local and international. All threads weaving into the fabric of a nation still defining itself. The 19th century brought the age of expansion, and with it, the promise of untapped resources. The Louisiana Purchase had already doubled the nation's territory, and pioneers pushed westward, guided by the belief in manifest destiny. Gold in California sparked a frenzy that drew fortune seekers from across the globe, while silver, coal, and later oil fueled the fires of industrialization. Railroads became the veins of progress, carrying crops, minerals, and manufactured goods across a continent. Agriculture continued to thrive, with wheat fields in the Great Plains feeding both domestic populations and foreign markets. Immigrants became the backbone of labor, Irish and German farmers tilling soil in the Midwest, Chinese workers laying tracks through mountains, African Americans carving out lives after emancipation. America's economy was becoming not just larger, but more diverse, driven by both natural abundance and human determination. By the late 1800s, the United States had emerged as an agricultural powerhouse. Grain exports surged, feeding industrial Europe, while cotton remained a staple of Southern output. Yet, the transition from subsistence farming to commercial agriculture was not without pain. Sharecropping trapped many freedmen in cycles of poverty, while small farmers in the West battled harsh climates, unpredictable markets, and powerful railroad monopolies. The rise of agricultural machinery, plows, reapers, and combines boosted productivity, but also displaced traditional farming communities. Still, agriculture provided the stability upon which the nation's industrial revolution would stand. America's breadbasket was not only feeding its people, it was feeding its future. Early trade cemented America's position in the global economy. From the whaling ports of New England to the cotton exports of the South, American goods reached markets across Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Shipping industries boomed, and New York Harbor became the beating heart of transatlantic commerce. With every ship that left its shores, America announced itself not merely as a nation of farmers, but as a rising economic power with global ambitions. By the dawn of the 20th century, the foundations had been laid, an economy fueled by fertile land, rich resources, and relentless ambition. The stage was set for an industrial transformation that would propel the United States into an era of unparalleled growth and influence. Industrial Revolution, rise of industry, and global trade. By the late 19th century, the United States was no longer just a nation of farmers, and pioneers. It was becoming an industrial giant. The hum of machines echoed through sprawling factories. Steel rails stretched like veins across the land, and smokestacks painted skylines with the soot of progress. This was the Industrial Revolution in America, a transformation that would forever change how people lived and worked. Cities swelled as rural families and immigrants alike flocked to urban centers in search of opportunity. Pittsburgh became the capital of steel, Detroit, the home of automobiles, and Chicago, a hub of meatpacking and railroads. Innovation drove this surge. Thomas Edison's electric light illuminated homes and streets. Alexander Graham Bell's telephone connected voices across miles. And Henry Ford's assembly line put cars within reach of ordinary Americans. The economy no longer depended solely on the land. It was fueled by machines, labor, and relentless invention. Industry brought wealth beyond measure to a new class of magnates, whose names would become synonymous with American capitalism. Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Morgan. They built empires of steel, oil, railroads, and banking, amassing fortunes so vast that the era became known as the Gilded Age. Yet behind their glittering success were millions of workers who toiled in grueling conditions, their sweat and struggle, paving the way for prosperity they would rarely share. 10-hour workdays, unsafe factories, and child labor were realities for countless families. This inequality gave rise to organized labor, the American Federation of Labor, and striking workers who demanded dignity and fair wages. The clash between capital and labor became as much a part of the industrial age as the gleaming skyscrapers it built. As America's industrial power grew, so too did its role in global trade. Exports of steel, machinery, textiles, and grain surged across the Atlantic, making the United States an indispensable player in the world economy. Ports like New York, San Francisco, and New Orleans buzzed with activity as goods flowed in and out, linking America to markets in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The completion of the Panama Canal in 1914 was a triumph of engineering and ambition, shortening trade routes and cementing America's dominance in the Western Hemisphere. With every ship that sailed and every factory that roared, the U.S. economy expanded its reach far beyond its borders. The country was no longer an isolated republic. It was a rising global economic powerhouse. The early 20th century tested America's economic strength in profound ways. World War I turned its factories into arsenals of democracy, producing weapons, uniforms, and supplies that fueled Allied victory. The post-war decade, the Roaring Twenties, saw unprecedented consumerism. Radios, automobiles, and home appliances flooded the market, bringing modern comforts to millions. Wall Street symbolized the optimism of the era, till it all came crashing down in 1929. The Great Depression crippled the economy, shuttered banks, and left millions unemployed. Breadlines stretched through city streets, farms collapsed under. Dust storms and despair gripped the nation. Yet from this crisis emerged resilience. Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal redefined the role of government, providing jobs, security, and hope. Though imperfect, it laid the groundwork for an economy that could adapt, recover, and grow stronger from adversity. World War II would become the ultimate test of American industry. Factories shifted from consumer goods to tanks, planes, and munitions, producing at a scale unmatched by any other nation. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, symbolized by Rosie the Riveter, proving that the arsenal of democracy was powered not only by machines, but by people determined to defend freedom. When the war ended in 1945, America's economy stood unrivaled, its industries intact, its infrastructure strong, its resources abundant. While much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins, the United States emerged as the workshop of the world, ready to lead in trade, innovation, and prosperity. The Industrial Revolution had propelled America from a young republic to an economic titan. Setting the stage for the modern superpower it would become post-World War II boom, technology, and the modern economic landscape. The end of World War II ushered in a golden age of American prosperity. Returning soldiers benefited from the GI Bill, which funded education, homeownership, and business ventures. Suburbs bloomed across the nation with white picket fences and newly paved roads symbolizing stability and opportunity. The American dream became tangible for millions. Steady jobs, affordable homes, and consumer goods once unimaginable. Factories that had once built weapons now produced cars, televisions, and refrigerators. The highway system, championed by President Eisenhower, stitched the country together, making mobility and commerce faster than ever before. Meanwhile, the dollar replaced the British pound as the cornerstone of global finance, cementing America's role at the center of the world economy. The post-war boom was not just about wealthy, it was about identity. As Americans came to see themselves as the leaders of a new global order. Yet, this prosperity was not shared equally. While the middle class expanded, systemic inequalities persisted. African Americans, despite contributing heroically during the war, faced barriers to housing, jobs, and education. Women who had kept industries alive during wartime were pressured back into domestic roles, sparking debates that would later ignite feminist movements. In the rural South, poverty clung stubbornly to generations, while Native American communities struggled under policies that often eroded their sovereignty. But even amid these inequities, the economic tide was undeniable. American companies dominated global markets. Coca-Cola, General Motors, IBM, and later McDonald's became symbols of both U.S. capitalism and culture to the world. America wasn't just a country, it was an economic brand. The Cold War era further shaped the American economy. Competing with the Soviet Union required massive investment in science, technology, and defense. The space race pushed boundaries of innovation, leading to satellites, computers, and eventually the Apollo moon landing, a triumph not only of exploration but of economic might. Defense spending fueled industries and research universities, while consumer culture exploded with advertising, credit cards, and shopping malls. By the 1970s, however, cracks began to appear. Oil crises rattled the economy, stagflation undermined growth, and globalization began shifting manufacturing overseas. The once unstoppable machine faced new challenges, testing America's resilience. In a rapidly changing world, the 1980s and 1990s marked another economic transformation. Deregulation, tax reforms, and a surge in finance reshaped Wall Street, while Silicon Valley emerged as the cradle of the digital revolution. Personal computers, the internet, and mobile phones rewired not only the economy but human interaction itself. American tech companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google became titans of the information age, extending U.S. economic influence into every corner of the globe. Meanwhile, the fall of the Soviet Union left the U.S. as the world's sole superpower, and globalization accelerated under American leadership. Trade agreements like NAFTA and the rise of multinational corporations intertwined the U.S. economy. With global markets, it was an era of expansion, innovation, and unmatched dominance. Today, the American economy is both dynamic and complex, a landscape defined by innovation and contradiction. It remains the world's largest economy, driven by technology, finance, energy, and entertainment. The dollar still reigns supreme as the global currency of trust. Yet challenges persist: widening inequality, outsourcing, automation, and the mounting pressures of climate change. Startups and tech giants push the boundaries of what is possible, from artificial intelligence to space exploration, while millions of workers struggle with stagnant wages and rising living costs. The story of America's economy has always been one of transformation, resilience, and reinvention. From fertile fields to digital frontiers, it continues to evolve, restless, ambitious, and forever striving toward the next horizon. Current situation: politics and power in the modern era. In the 21st century, the United States remains a nation where politics carries the weight of global consequence. The halls of Congress and the White House are not merely domestic centers of debate. They are command centers whose decisions ripple across oceans. every election becomes a global spectacle, watched by allies and adversaries alike. For America's leadership shapes the balance of power in trade, diplomacy, and defense. The United States is not only the world's oldest surviving democracy, but also its most scrutinized. Its political system, forged in the late 18th century, has endured revolutions, wars, and crises. Yet today, it faces new strains: polarization, partisanship, and a public often divided in vision. In an age of instant communication, the clash of ideas is amplified, making American politics both an emblem of freedom and a mirror of its deep internal struggles. The presidency remains the most visible symbol of American power. From Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats to John F. Kennedy's soaring rhetoric, from Ronald Reagan's confident optimism to Barack Obama's promise of hope and change, the office has been both a stage and a pulpit. In recent years, the world has seen how shifts in presidential leadership can reshape alliances, redefine trade agreements, and alter the course of climate and security policies. The United States, unlike many nations, experiences a change of leadership every 4 or 8 years, ensuring renewal but also inviting uncertainty. Allies often wonder, will the America they deal with tomorrow be the same as the one they knew yesterday? This duality is part of the nation's political DNA, flexible yet unpredictable, stable yet turbulent. Congress, too, remains central, though it has become increasingly paralyzed by partisanship. The ideological divide between Republicans and Democrats has widened, turning legislative debates into battles of attrition rather than collaboration. Issues such as healthcare, immigration, gun control, taxation ignite fierce arguments, often leaving gridlock in their wake. Yet beneath the noise lies a truth: the American political system was designed to withstand such tensions. The checks and balances envisioned by the Founding Fathers ensure that no single branch dominates, even if compromise sometimes seems elusive. It is a system built not for efficiency, but for endurance, a testament to both its genius and its frustrations. Beyond its borders, American political influence is both revered and resented. Through NATO, the United Nations, and countless bilateral agreements, the U.S. maintains a global footprint unmatched by any other democracy. American presidents often walk a tightrope, projecting strength abroad while navigating division at home. From the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to negotiations with rising powers like China, the choices made in Washington shape the course of the 21st century. To many, the United States embodies the ideals of freedom and democracy. To others, it represents overreach and intervention. This tension has always been part of America's global role, a nation both admired and criticized. Both leader and DIS are UPTOR. Yet perhaps the greatest challenge to American politics today is not foreign rivalry, but internal cohesion. The polarization of the electorate, fueled by social media, disinformation, and cultural divides, has created a climate where consensus feels out of reach. Debates over race, gender, climate, and national identity are as fierce as any foreign conflict, testing the resilience of America's democratic institutions. Still, history offers perspective. The Civil War, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, all were storms that threatened the Republic, yet the nation endured. Today, as before, the United States stands at a crossroads, its politics turbulent, but its capacity for reinvention intact. The question is not whether America will survive, but how it will choose to define itself in an age where every decision carries global weight, conflicts, challenges, and global position. For much of the 21st century, the United States has grappled with conflicts that define not just its foreign policy, but its very identity. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq became the longest and costliest military engagements in modern U.S. history, testing the limits of its military power and the patience of its people. The fight against terrorism reshaped airports, intelligence networks, and alliances, embedding a sense of vulnerability that still lingers. American troops, once hailed as liberators, often found themselves caught in the quagmire of rebuilding. Nations fractured by war. The cost was staggering not only in dollars but in lives, in the physical and emotional scars carried by veterans, and in the questions raised about the limits of American power. These wars forced the nation to confront a difficult truth. Even the most powerful military on earth cannot always bend the world to its will. While wars abroad tested America's might, challenges at home tested its unity. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, forged a moment of national solidarity, but the years that followed revealed deep divisions. Immigration became a flashpoint, with debates raging over borders, security, and identity. Mass shootings ignited fierce battles over gun control, while healthcare reform polarized communities across red and blue states. The financial crisis of 2008 brought Wall Street to its knees, forcing the government to intervene on an unprecedented scale. Millions lost homes and jobs, but out of the rubble emerged movements like Occupy Wall Street, demanding accountability and justice. Each challenge peeled back layers of the American story, revealing both the fragility and the resilience of its democracy. On the global stage, America continues to wield immense power, but no longer uncontested. The rise of China as an economic and military rival has reshaped geopolitics. Russia's assertive foreign policy challenges NATO's strength, while regional conflicts in the Middle East test American influence. Allies still look to Washington for leadership, but they also hedge, forging independent paths in trade and diplomacy. Climate change has become another battleground, with America alternately leading and retreating from global agreements. The struggle is not only about policy, but about credibility. Can the United States be counted on to lead consistently, or will internal divisions dictate its global posture? The world watches closely, aware that America's choices reverberate far beyond its borders. Technology and cyber warfare have opened a new frontier of conflict. No longer limited to tanks and planes, battles now unfold in the invisible world of networks and data. Election interference, hacking, and disinformation campaigns threaten the integrity of democracies everywhere. And America is both a target and a player in this new digital battleground. The challenge is as much about defending institutions as it is about reimagining security for the 21st century. While America's Silicon Valley fuels innovation, it also creates vulnerabilities platforms that can unite or divide, empower or destabilize. In this arena, the line between domestic politics and global conflict blurs, making the stakes higher than ever before. Yet, despite the turbulence, America retains a global position unlike any other. Its military alliances stretch across continents. Its cultural exports dominate screens and sound waves, and its financial markets set the rhythm of the global economy. Washington remains the diplomatic epicenter where crises are debated, solutions are sought, and power is negotiated. From the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific, from climate summits to trade agreements, the United States continues to shape the destiny of nations. Its challenges are immense, its conflicts complex, but its influence undeniable. For better or worse, the United States remains at the center of the world stage, struggling, adapting, and striving to live up to the promise it has carried since its founding, to lead not just with power, but with purpose, future outlook, hopes, and uncertainties. As the United States looks toward the future, it finds itself at a crossroads unlike any before. The 21st century is no longer a story of unchallenged dominance, but of adaptation in a multipolar world. The forces of globalization, technology, and shifting power dynamics mean that America must constantly redefine its role. Will it continue to lead as the architect of international order, or will internal divisions weaken its voice on the world stage? The answer lies not only in the corridors of Washington but in the everyday lives of its citizens. The future of the Republic depends on whether it can reconcile its ideals with its realities, bridging divides of race, class, and ideology to forge a path forward. Climate change looms as both a threat and an opportunity. Rising seas, devastating. Wildfires and extreme weather challenge America's infrastructure and test the resilience of its communities. At the same time, the push for renewable energy and green technology offers the chance to lead a new industrial revolution. America has the resources, the innovation, and the talent to transform its economy into a model of sustainability, but it also faces fierce competition from nations racing toward the same goal. The question is whether the U.S. will seize the moment or allow hesitation and division to let others define the future of energy and the environment. Technology continues to shape America's destiny. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration are redefining what it means to be a global superpower. Elon Musk's rockets pierce the heavens, while Silicon Valley companies develop tools that may one day change human life itself. Yet, with such power comes responsibility. The digital age has already revealed its darker sides: misinformation, privacy erosion, and job displacement through automation. The future will demand not just innovation, but wisdom policies that protect the vulnerable while unleashing the creativity that has always been America's greatest strength. The nation's ability to navigate this balance will determine whether technology becomes a ladder of progress or a chasm of inequality. Domestically, the great test of the coming decades will be unity. America is a nation built on diversity. But diversity without cohesion can fracture. Demographic shifts are reshaping the electorate, with minorities becoming an ever larger share of the population. This presents both promise and peril, a chance to create a truly inclusive democracy, or a risk of deeper cultural and political divides. Movements for social justice, gender equality, and indigenous rights demand that America live up to its ideals not as words on parchment, but as realities felt by every citizen. The choice before the nation is stark: cling to divisions of the past or embrace the possibilities of a shared future, and so. The story of the United States remains unfinished. It is a story of triumphs and tragedies, of contradictions and possibilities. From the Declaration of Independence to the digital age, America has stood as both beacon and battleground. A nation constantly striving to reconcile who it is with who it wishes to be. The future will test its resolve whether it can lead not only with power, but with principle, not only with wealth, but with wisdom. The world watches as it always has, for the choices America makes will echo far beyond its borders. The United States remains, as it has always been, a work in progress, restless, ambitious, and forever chasing the horizon. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise of America. This is Historic Horizon TV, where history comes alive and the past meets the present to shape our future. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next great story is just beyond the horizon.